Welcome to the Fully Mindful, where we explore what it means to live with intention, creativity, authenticity, and connection. I'm your host, Melissa Chareau, mindfulness and breathwork facilitator, neurodivergent lawyer and coach, and fellow human navigating this wild and beautiful ride we call life. On this podcast, we dive deep with interviews featuring inspiring guests, share solo mini episodes packed with guided mindfulness practices to help you center and thrive, and mix things up with tangents and sidebars, where my friend and fellow podcaster Debbie Harrell from the New World Normal joins me for some real, random, and meaningful conversations. So if you're ready to pause, reflect, and expand, you're in the right place. Let's get fully mindful.
And we're conditioned that way all the way through. And then we get to the corporate job and we just think that we have to push, or we're not going to get ahead and we're not going to be successful. We're not going to be taken seriously. But when do we actually pause and step back and think, well, is this even what I want? Is this even aligning with what is good for me? And sometimes it's the health issues in a yoga class that shifts it all. Instead of pushing my thoughts away and running away from them, I just started noticing them and then letting them flow. And I call it riding the wave. So if they're positive thoughts and they're inspiring, I just ride it. I just go with it and I see what comes up. If they're negative, I notice and then I just let it go, kind of like a balloon. I don't run away from it, but I don't keep reliving it because it just brings me down and it really doesn't serve a purpose.
Hey everybody, it's Melissa Chareau with the Fully Mindful, and have quite an episode for you today with Sarah Ariaudo, author, speaker, mindset coach, and creator of the Mindful-based healing program to address the mental and emotional well-being of cancer fighters and their family. It's an amazing conversation. She's super down to earth. One of the best stories I've heard about mindfulness and how she's come to use mindfulness and self-compassion comes out of her relationship with her daughter. It's just extraordinary. And you're going to want to check out the show notes when we're done because, my goodness, she's got an amazing book called Cancer Journey, the Cancer Journey Guidebook, and a whole bunch of cool stuff. And check out below in the show notes how she has a free mindfulness practice just for you. So settle in and enjoy Sarah Ariaudo. Well, I'm excited, everyone. This is Melissa Chareau with the Fully Mindful, and I am super excited to have with me Sarah Ariaudo, who is from Southern California, or at least that's where she is right now. She began her career in oncology with a desire to help people undergoing chemotherapy or radiation, recognizing there was a disconnect in support provided to patients, treating the body mostly and not as much providing the mental and emotional support for processing the diagnosis and dealing with the body change and the financial strain and all the things that go with cancer. She recognized this gap, and with her training in mindset and mindfulness, she founded the Mindful-based healing program, which she is running, and it's formed to bridge that gap, to provide patients, healthcare providers, family members, anyone who needs support with the right tools to manage those other aspects of cancer. And I'm really excited to have her talk about that a little bit more with us today and how she came to get to that particular founding of the Mindful-based healing program and what exactly she does and what tools that she uses. So welcome, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Melissa. I'm so glad to be here.
Thank you. And a little bit of a clunky introduction there, but I figured we have you, the actual person, here to talk a bit about what it is you do. But before we jump into that, if you could just tell us a little bit about your background, where you grew up and kind of what got you interested in, or what motivated or inspired or led you to working in oncology.
Yeah. So I grew up in a small town in the Midwest, and I knew I wanted to help people, but I didn't think I could afford to to go to school to be a doctor. And already back then, nurses were already burnt out. So I knew I didn't want to be a nurse. So I did some research and I found a radiation therapist, which appeared to help cancer patients. And so I took it to my guidance counselor to try to find a program, and they actually led me to X-ray, the diagnostic portion of it. So I actually did start out in diagnostic. I was fortunate enough to do a rotation and committed to radiation oncology, which for those that don't know, that's delivering the high doses of radiation to the tumors. So I did that for several years and managed a couple of cancer centers and became a change management consultant. So going into the cancer centers to help processes be more efficient and them to deliver optimal care. But it was actually during the pandemic when I created this program because of my personal experience, my own health and healing issues. I benefited from a mindfulness practice. And so taking what I had learned from my own personal experience and then all of the trainings and the healthcare background that I had, I thought who better to serve than those that are, dealing with the stress and anxiety and financial toxicity is what they call it for cancer treatment.
Yeah, I can really see that, and we'll dig into that a bit more. Was that something that, at a very young age, that was something that you were interested in, and later in life that you understood that it was, oh, well, I could really help people with cancer?
Yeah, I think at an early age, called myself or deemed myself like the protector and the caretaker of my family. I grew up, it was very traditional Midwest. The women worked, but they were also the ones that did all of the things around the house. They were the domestic caretakers and cooks and all of those things. And I certainly knew I did not want that role. That's just not me. I would rather be outside mowing the grass or, fixing the roof. And my family, I grew up with an alcoholic father. And so just deeming myself the protector over my mom and sister, that was just my role. And so it made sense to have a career path that just carried that forward. Yeah.
Well, that must have been really challenging. I myself and am in recovery, but not just for myself, but I actually work in Al-Anon program because of family members who have suffered from alcoholism. And so I know how tough that can be growing up with a family member that, it's just a different dynamic. And like you said, wanting to protect the other family members. So I guess I'm sort of interested, and maybe we didn't expect to talk about that. So it's okay if you don't want to talk about it, but I was just sort of fascinated with that idea of the healthy caretaker, right? So in Al-Anon, for instance, we learn how not to cross those boundaries, right? Like you help people who want to be helped and in a way that is actually helpful, right? Rather than, well, I'm going to use some language here, co-signing their BS, right? And that's a crude way of putting it, but basically, being codependent with their illness. And so I'm interested in that. Like, how were you able to walk that line where you're able to help your family, but not maybe cross into those boundaries that could be really toxic to you?
That is a really good point. So, growing up, I did not know about codependency and boundaries really at all. Even I grew up, there was one bathroom in my house and there was 3 girls getting ready every morning, once my parents divorced and it was just the 3 of us. So there were no boundaries. If you wanted a bathroom, you shared it with whoever was there.
Right.
So definitely grew up codependent and, the analogies that you may hear about carrying their baggage or carrying that suitcase for them, I definitely did that. And it really wasn't until later on in life, after my health issues, which prompted me to have a mindfulness practice and then learn and develop from there. That's when I really was more exposed to the boundaries talk
Mhm.
and finding out how to process my own issues and trauma and set up boundaries in order to keep myself in a healthy space. So it was really, gosh, I think mid to late 20s is when I really started to get the concept of that. And that was almost an epiphany moment where I realized that my desire to help people, so even from early on, and then again in my career, I was kind of using as a coping mechanism, in that the more I could help people and be involved with what they were dealing with, whether it's a cancer diagnosis or relationship issues or family dynamics, I didn't have to then deal with my own issues because I was so busy helping other people, and I felt good because I was helping other people. And once I learned more about the boundaries and was trying to set up healthy boundaries, I realized, oh, I have to deal with what's going on inside of me first. And that was kind of a scary place to be. I wasn't used to listening to my own thoughts and being alone or distracted. I think that's the key, is a lot of us are distracted. And so we don't think we have the issues that we have just because we're not dealing with it. And so once that was realized, it opened up a whole new perspective for me. I reevaluated relationships that I had. I let go of a lot of the relationships that were in my life. I set up healthier boundaries, which is still a work in progress for me, to maintain those healthy boundaries to keep myself, in a positive space. But it really did shift things for the better. I think it's a lifelong lesson for me, though, and something that I'll have to practice, for the rest of my life. I'm definitely not perfect at it, and I don't foresee being perfect at it, but at least I have the concept. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it is fascinating, especially for those in the helping professions where those lines can be really blurred, right? Like how do you care and really listen to a patient or a family member's concerns and not take it on completely ourselves? And whether that's because, like you said, you had this epiphany where you realized, oh, the more I'm doing for others, the less I have to look at myself. Or, and I'm sure this was also going on, a true desire to help other people, which is a healthy impulse, right? To want to help our fellow human beings out there who are suffering, or, have something that they need help with. But so it is that challenge, I think, for anyone who's in healthcare or any other helping profession, of how do I first take care of myself so that I can actually have a healthy way of helping you. And I think that's such an important point that you made, of getting that knowledge. And I want to talk a little bit more about your mindfulness practice, but you said something about like sitting with your thoughts and being with your thoughts and your feelings. And so often I think people who haven't practiced or had that much exposure to mindfulness, they have this idea that when we meditate or we use mindfulness practices, we're not thinking about anything, like that's the goal or something. And Susan David talks about this, and I've talked about this. Like, those are dead people's goals, right? Like not having a thought or
Right.
an emotion. Like, we're human beings, we're going to have them. And so I think your point about like actually being with them, we're not pushing them away, we're not trying to eliminate them, we're trying to be with them. And so when you first encountered that aspect of the practice, what was that like for you? Like, oh my gosh, I haven't really been paying attention as much to, my own thoughts and feelings, and now I am. So what was that experience like for you?
Yeah. So it took a while for me to get there with my thoughts because, again, I was just busy distracting myself in various ways. And luckily, choosing to care for people, yes, is a positive way, but I've made unhealthy choices as well. And so it really started with paying attention to my body, but I can't even take credit for that. And my body had shut down my cycle for almost 2 years. So it got to the point where I just couldn't ignore it anymore. And I was forced to pay attention to my body, because I knew I wanted to have kids someday. So I'm like, well, I should probably address this since it just disappeared. And once I started paying attention to my body and the triggers,
Mm.
it was a very slow process then to be like, okay, it helped me health wise. What else can I learn and benefit from this? And so implementing yoga and implementing stillness and trying to be less reactive. So using tools like, just taking a breath when I'm initially triggered, or that's my default mode, is to be triggered or upset, to just take a step back. So a very slow process, but then it was eye-opening that, oh, okay, maybe I can look at this from a different perspective, or maybe it's really not that big of a deal. Let me just evaluate or sit for a second and think about what could possibly be going on here, and try to take the personal out of it, instead of feeling like it's a personal attack or a cut or negative towards me or at me. Could there be something else that's behind it? Maybe it has nothing to do with me. I'm just the one that's standing there. So after learning to pay attention mentally, externally, though, that's with external relationships and interactions, then again, I progressed to dabbling in meditation. For me, mindfulness and meditation are different, and I resisted both because I thought they were the same. And I did think it was clearing my mind for like 45 minutes a day, which I still don't do. But once I started just dabbling in meditation, okay, let me just sit here and see how it feels. All of a sudden, instead of pushing my thoughts away and running away from them, I just started noticing them and then letting them flow. And I call it riding the wave. So if they're positive thoughts and they're inspiring, I just ride it. I just go with it and I see what comes up. If they're negative, I notice, and then I just let it go, kind of like a balloon. I don't run away from it, but I don't keep reliving it, because it just brings me down and it really doesn't serve a purpose. If I've noticed it, then I've learned my lesson, or I've acknowledged. It's just time to move forward. So that's really what's benefited me, and then allowed me to, process, because there are things negative that come up and happen, but allowing myself to shift to the more positive and what opportunity this could be. That's really what's changed a lot for me.
Let's take a quick break.
Hey everybody, this is Melissa with the Fully Mindful. It's the new year, and I bet you're feeling the need to unlock your full potential and embrace empowerment, or maybe something completely different. Well, I'm excited to offer a new program with one-on-one breathwork and coaching sessions. We'll embark on a truly transformative journey of self-discovery, combining conscious, connected breathwork and embodiment coaching, and more. So contact me, Melissa, at the Fully Mindful, for your transformative session today. Yeah, I mean, you said a couple of things in there that I'd like to follow up on. And I love that for that you use this riding the wave of the positive, because it's such a good experience. And so when we have that mindfulness practice, whether it's in the form of other practices or meditation or both, we then have that, what I'll call the pause, where we can see the things, right? Oh, this is positive. I like this. I'm going to ride the wave. Oh, this is negative. Oh, I'm going to notice this, get curious about it, and then let it go, right? Get the information that I need and let it, move. So I love that you do that. And the one thing I wanted to follow up on is you said that this kind of came to you from some health issues. And you mentioned sort of ignoring a particular health issue for a couple of years. And you are not the first, nor will you be the last person on this podcast who has come to mindfulness or some other practice or, some other epiphany, because the body actually was like, that's enough. We've had enough here. I'm trying to give you a message, and please pay attention to me. So what was going on for you, if you feel comfortable talking about it, that you were able to and willing to sort of ignore this problem that you were having health-wise for a couple of years?
Yeah. So at the time I was traveling a lot for work, and I had been for several years. And I was very much like, I think a lot of women in their 20s, I wanted to climb the corporate ladder. I wanted to be the best at what I'm doing. I wanted to prove myself and all of the things. And I was on that trajectory. I definitely bought into the culture of, hustle and grind. And if you don't work hard, you can't play hard. So I was proud workaholic. I was proud that I had worked, 14 to 16-hour days between being on site with clients and then doing follow up, typically in a hotel, and then doing research to make sure that I knew the answers that I didn't know before, or expanding my knowledge in different product areas. So I definitely was working a lot, and I was traveling a lot from coast to coast, almost every week. I averaged 10 or 11 out of every 12 weeks of travel, Monday through Friday. So it was a lot of strain on my body, but I was young and I had the energy and I thought it was fine. Eating on the road isn't always the healthiest. But I got up, I worked out, I ate as healthy as I could. So I thought I was doing all of the right things. But what I didn't realize is I wasn't coping with stress in a healthy way. I wasn't addressing it, I wasn't dealing with it. Travel alone can be stressful on your body. It messes with your digestive tract, it dehydrates you. There's all sorts of physical things that happen when you're traveling, and then when you're traveling that much. But I was able to ignore some of the, digestive issues and some of the stabbing pains and the triggers, because I thought it was just, well, maybe I ate something bad, or I didn't get a lot of sleep, or I could explain it away.
Right. And it's easy to like look and try to look for things to explain it away because like, no, I mean, we're all human. Like, we don't want to go, oh my God, maybe there's something wrong with me or that I need to pay attention to. But 9 times out of 10, it is an easy explanation. It is something you ate, or a lack of sleep, or you didn't drink enough water, or, all of the things. It's when we like kind of start to ignore those things for the long term where things get a little problematic, right?
Yes, yes. So I did actually see doctor, and I did do some things. I went on a really strict diet. They cut out everything except for vegetables and then slowly put other things back in. I had 3 exploratory surgeries where they couldn't find anything. I was put on high doses of medication for diabetics. They were getting ready to triple the medication, and it wasn't working. I was never diabetic, but they were trying to figure out what was going on. So they were, based on their trainings and my symptoms, they were coming up with different ideas or solutions. And I went off the medication, and I was just getting ready to give up, quite frankly, when I had lost my cycle. And so I kept with a clean diet. I kept doing all of the things, but that's when I started to do yoga. Is I was trying to do more gentle things with my body. And really in that training, I learned about concepts other than just the movement. It was really about, pain is your body telling you that something's wrong. Discomfort is either your body challenging yourself to grow, or it's the precursor to pain. So really paying attention to what the difference was. And that was eye-opening for me. That was really the first shift that I noticed of, oh, I can pay attention and I can choose. I don't just have to push through because I'm in this class and everyone else is doing it. I get to choose based on my body. And I
Right.
don't know why that was eye-opening for me, but it was. And that's really what started changing the trajectory of decision making and paying attention and speaking up for myself when it came to my health.
That's so fascinating. And I know I practice yoga as well and have for a long time. And, and have done lots of different forms of yoga, some more gentle and based on those premises that you were talking about, some not so much, some more like exercise, I guess. And, it's fascinating. I was in a class fairly recently and I was just getting over actually having COVID. And I mentioned it to the teacher, and the teacher just said, you could be in child's pose the whole time if you want. Like, just pay attention. What is your body telling you that you need in this moment? And like you, that was sort of, revelatory to me the first time I heard that. Like, wait, I don't have to just do it because, you have to. I had this in my mind, and it's not just the external pressure that our culture puts on us of go, 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 but like the internal pressure of like, oh, I have to do this to be a better, whether it's better at my job or a better yogi or a better whatever, right? Like, oh, right. Like we can just pay attention to our bodies. And something I'm sort of fascinated with is, in our culture, we have really come to, I guess, overprivilege the mind and our brain and, what happens between our ears. And we don't pay a whole lot of attention to our bodies except to brutalize them through exercise for a particular result, right? Like we're not actually paying attention to what they're telling us. So I love that this is how you're first arriving at this realization and this epiphany of paying attention to your body, and it's subtle and kind of nuanced, and we're not very experienced at doing it, right?
Yeah, yeah, you're exactly right. I think for me, and it sounds like for you and probably others, it's not necessarily the movement of yoga, although I think that that's extremely beneficial, and I've definitely found a love for it that I didn't have before. But part of why I think yoga is so beneficial is it does teach us or give us permission to listen to our bodies and adapt. And where else do we really get that permission? Not that we need it, but as humans, we kind of search for it. Even little kids, we tell them when they can go to the bathroom, when they can raise their hand, when they can do things. And we're conditioned that way all the way through. And then we get to the corporate job and we just think that we have to push, 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 or we're not going to get ahead and we're not going to be successful. We're not going to be taken seriously. But when do we actually pause and step back and think, well, is this even what I want? Is this even aligning with what is good for me? And sometimes it's the health issues in a yoga class that shifts it all. So it is really fascinating.
Yeah. And so, okay, so this is sort of your first foray into this world or this understanding. And then you start learning these other mindfulness practices where you're paying attention to your thoughts and your feelings and not pushing them away. And then what happens with your health? Does it have a positive impact?
Yeah. So after I was able to, so again, I started with yoga and then I just started implementing more formal mindfulness techniques, whether it was breathing techniques. Those have actually been extremely powerful, which for some people might sound silly. How can breathing really help? But there's scientific proof that it can. And I've experienced it in different procedures and pain management that I've had to go through. So just implementing more formal mindfulness techniques. And then once I was comfortable and I had a regular mindfulness practice where I was paying attention to my body and using the, loving kindness and breathing techniques, I started exploring more about the meditation. So again, I had resisted it because of the preconceived notion that I had about it. It wasn't accessible for me. It was boring. I didn't want to do it. But then just trying different styles of meditation and finally finding a style that works for me, where I don't have to just be still and not think, because that's not possible for me. I can just do what I said before, which is acknowledge and explore why these negative thoughts are coming up and then let it go. And then I often am inspired during meditations. I wrote the book and actually created the book after I started meditating because it just was so clear that this was a need that wasn't filled. And why not me? Because I'm sure there's a lot of people like me who resisted because we didn't think it was accessible. So why not make it accessible so that other people can get the health benefits?
Hey, everybody, if you like this conversation, make sure to rate the show in Apple or Spotify or wherever you are listening so that others can find it and enjoy it too. And if you like the show and want to keep hearing great conversations with really interesting people about how they found their purpose, please donate to the show. Go to thefullymindful.com to donate today. Right. And the way that you share the message, whether it's in your program or in your book, is is going to be unique. And some people are going to absolutely hear that message from you in a way that they wouldn't hear it from me or somebody else, right? And you're in that unique position of not only the personal lived experience of a health issue, and then, of course, all of this training, education, and on the job training with cancer and oncology. And so you're just in that perfect position to be able to speak this language in a way. And I love how you put that. They might have also had this resistance, the same resistance that you had, these preconceived notions of like, oh, I have to not think, or it might be boring, or I don't want to, whatever it is that you felt, I've certainly felt, and finding what works for you. And so like, I love that message too, for people who are out there. It's like, find out what works for you. Maybe sitting on a cushion with like some incense and chanting is not going to work for you, but maybe, a mindfulness walk might, or maybe just breathing techniques, or you mentioned loving kindness. Some people may not know what that is. Like, explain, what your version of loving kindness practices are.
Yeah. So that one, that one took a while, but loving kindness in the space of mindfulness is just learning to love and appreciate yourself and others. And so it's seeing the good in people, which I think is so important, especially now. I don't care what side of the fence you're on. So just trying to see the good and the humanity in other people. And how can you really see the good in other people if you don't find it in yourself? So it's just learning to practice self-love and then love for others, and just recognizing that we're part of the same. We're part of the human race, humanity, and we're just all doing the best that we can. So that one has been, it was easy for me to love others, but to really learn to love myself so that I could fully and unjudgmentally love others, that took longer.
Yeah. Yeah. How were you able to get there? Because I know I had to use a trick. Like, one of the practices that I learned was kind of coming up with these phrases and saying them to first people that I really cared. Like, may you be happy, may you, live with ease, may you be healthy, may you be secure. And I could easily think those things for other people, although certainly there were people who were more challenging than others. But that came easily. But saying something like that to myself, or more importantly, feeling that for myself, was really challenging. And I had to sort of like trick myself to like, in that particular practice, that's a metta practice where you say all these, beautiful things to other people, that I would have to get to the whole world and wishing everybody in the whole world, plants, animals, other people. And then I would include myself as the we. So I would trick myself into like, okay, well, I'm part of this thing. I can at least acknowledge that I am part of the entire world. So may we be happy. May we, be secure. And I was able to do that. What did you do to sort of get yourself into the place where you could have that self-love? Because I think in this culture, we're not taught to do that.
No,
We're just not. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would listen to the traditional, you can find loving kindness scripts and recordings out there for free. And I've made some myself. But what really helped me was walking the walk, if you will. So I was listening to those, and I could believe it or try to feel it for, the 5-10 minutes, whatever the recording was. But what really shifted was I was looking in the mirror, and I have a 5-year-old daughter, but this was years ago. And I was criticizing myself with how my post-baby body looked years after I had a baby. And I started, pinching the inches that I didn't like to see. And she was standing next to me, and she did that. And I thought, oh, okay, well, I can say whatever I want, but if I'm not practicing it, it doesn't matter. So I started saying things to myself like, thank you for providing a home for my daughter's name is Ellie, for Ellie to grow. And I started trying to find the good things about it, because that was setting the example for her. So by doing it for her, I was really doing it for myself. And then eventually, you say it and do it long enough that it becomes part of your routine and you begin to believe it, right? A belief is just a thought that you have repeatedly until it's solid. So practicing whenever I wanted to nitpick or cut on myself, even inadvertently, I would think of, would I say this to her, or
Mm.
would I want her to say it to herself? And typically the answer was no. So then I would say what I would want her to say about herself. So then I just started shifting my mindset to, okay, would I talk to my daughter or my best friend the way that I'm talking to myself? Or would I judge them the way I'm judging myself? And the answer was no. So I convinced myself to start talking like I'm talking to my daughter or my best friend. So anytime there was something that I needed to adjust or didn't like, how would I word it? I'm not perfect, so I'm not saying that now everything I do is wonderful and I'm so proud of everything. I'm not, but I'm definitely more gentle about how I present feedback to myself. And that's really helped, is just the repetition of my thoughts and my actions representing what I actually want to be.
I love that. Such a beautiful practice in the way that you framed it. Had that recognition when you saw your daughter sort of doing the same thing, probably not cognizant of what she was doing, but would eventually become
Right.
her mindset. And kind of having that, like, oh gosh, I don't want my daughter to feel that way. And so how can I help her? And in the process, you helped yourself. And I love that it's not just a loving kindness practice, like you said, in the traditional sense, although all those are really wonderful too, but really practicing, walking your talk and having that be part of the daily practice that you engage in, and still giving yourself feedback, but in a way that is helpful and gentle and loving, rather than hypercritical and downright mean. I mean, at least I know that's how I've been to myself. And and such a beautiful practice of, like, how do we treat ourselves like we would the people that we love the most?
Yeah.
And why wouldn't we? Right?
Yeah.
So these topics are probably in your book, right? So tell us a little bit more about your book.
Yeah. So it does cover the traditional mindfulness techniques. It's based in science. So from the studies that I've found, the white papers that are written, all of the things that are out there in regards to depression, anxiety, addiction, PTSD, there's all sorts of techniques and studies that have been shown. At the time that I started writing this, I couldn't find a whole lot about cancer, specifically a cancer program. Although there are studies that I did use to base these off of. But what I tried to do was write it for the average person. So I'm in the healthcare field. I love the neuroscience behind it. I love reading the research papers. I love the medical terminology. It all makes sense to me. But the average person, it probably doesn't make sense to. They don't know what these medical terms mean, nor do they care. And so I wanted it to be accessible for anyone who wanted to try it. And I wanted it to be beneficial for anyone who is willing to try it. So rather than requiring a 45-minute a day commitment and clearing your mind and having to listen to a particular recording or do a particular exercise, I provide the exercises, I provide the basis behind it, but then I relate it to their life. So if you're listening to it, you can find commonalities, or you can find a situation where it would work for you day to day. And the mindfulness techniques, you begin with a minute a day commitment. The meditation, if and when you're ready to try that, is a 5-minute a day commitment. And the reason that I started with it to be such a short time commitment is because when you feel like you have a win and you feel like you have control back of your life versus it being another thing you have to do, you're more
Mhm.
likely to continue. So if you do it for a minute a day, that's going to be more beneficial than if you do it 20 minutes one day and you never do it again. So that's really what I try to do. And then, like I said, there are the recordings and there are the specific exercises, but trying to tie it to your life where you can practice it, not having to listen to me on the audio, not having to carry your book around. You are empowered to carry this knowledge and apply it to how it works for you in your life. That's really the goal, because if it doesn't work for you, you're not going to do it. And just like my loving kindness example, listening to all of that was great. And I was so inspired for 5 to 10 minutes, but I wasn't practicing it day to day until I had that moment where I realized that my actions were not matching my values. And so that's really the goal. And I've been working with cancer centers to provide this for patients. That's my goal ultimately, is that all patients will have access to it for free. So I'm working with cancer centers to provide it for their patients, but they can also buy it on Amazon if their cancer center doesn't yet support it.
I love that too. And we'll talk more about your work with these cancer centers. But I love the idea of you can just start and maybe even forever do 1 minute a day if you wanted to. And I think of that book, Atomic Habits, where James Clear talks about that, like choose something that you can actually accomplish on the daily, because like you said, it's not helpful if you're doing 20 minutes. It's like going to the gym once a week.
Yeah.
It's not bad for you, but it doesn't have the impact that going to the gym even a few minutes a day would have. It's very similar. And then you develop this practice. And what I've found is with people who do something like a minute a day, and then maybe even graduate to 5 minutes a day, they want to do more. And they
Right.
want to practice something, whether it's a more formal practice longer. Some people never do that and still reap tremendous benefits from 5 minutes a day. But what they're doing is these other practices that you're talking about in their daily lives, where they're really applying mindfulness to, eating, to walking down the street, to being maybe in the process of accepting chemotherapy, and where the rubber really is meeting the road. Where these practices are really going to have the maximum benefit is when things aren't going well, right? It's
Right.
wonderful to have this practice when things are going well, but when things are scary, or stressful, or all of the things, that's where these practices can really help calm the nervous system and allow us to have the space to see and experience the positive things that are still happening around us. Right?
Yeah.
Because just because someone has a cancer diagnosis and it's scary and it's real and it's stressful and it's highly disruptive and financially terrifying and all of those things, really positive things are still happening in our lives. They just become harder to see and
Yeah.
harder to feel. And so these practices, the way that you're delivering them in this very accessible, practical way, allows people to experience all the things. So still have joy, still see love, still experience love, even in the most difficult of times, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's amazing. So tell me more about what you're doing with these cancer centers and what you're hoping to do with these cancer centers.
Yes. So again, people can buy this, on their own, but because of the stress and financial hardships and everything that they're going through, I didn't want it to be yet another thing that they had to do. So ultimately, I would love for insurance to pay for this. I'm working with a couple of cancer centers right now, an organization in Arizona and a couple in Southern California that are helping me collect data to prove the efficacy for my exact program. Like I said, that there's research out there that I based everything out of, but I want to show the efficacy for this. So they've purchased the books, they've implemented to a control group within their cancer centers, and we're collecting the data to show the difference in outcomes and even the quality of life, because that I think is the key. This is not a magic wand that's going to cure you from cancer. I'm not claiming that, or any chronic illness, but if it can help you increase the quality of the life that you have, well, that's arguably more important, right? Why be miserable for decades Or, could you enjoy life for 6 months, a year, 5 years, whatever it is that you're blessed with. So we're collecting the data and providing it to patients for free. I'm also working with some organizations like the American Cancer Society. They're evaluating to see how they can implement this to enhance the patient experience. So hoping to have more information on that soon, but we are in discussions and they're doing a board review of it over the next couple of months.
That's so exciting. I interviewed a integrative palliative medicine physician fairly recently, Dr. Delia Kiramonte. She's on the East Coast, and she has developed a program to teach physicians kind of how to do, because it's unusual to combine integrative care with palliative care, right? So like treating the whole person when there's a really serious illness and not just treating the symptoms. And then from her perspective, it starts first with the physicians and the care providers actually taking care of themselves so they can be present to what is happening with the patient as a whole person, right?
Right.
And her goal is similar to yours, which is how can we treat the whole person so that they can still, life is complicated, and just because you have a cancer diagnosis like we were saying earlier doesn't mean you can't also enjoy aspects of your life or feel love. And so how do we get to that point, right, where we treat the whole person so that they do experience all that? And I love that you're getting granular and you're like getting people to research this so that you can demonstrate why your particular set of programs, I mean, you already know because you were basing it on research, but just really wanting to be extra sure that this is in fact what's happening and how it's happening, which will give you more information, and maybe you add additional techniques to the practice. So I love that you're doing that, and that this is very exciting, and getting insurance to cover this so that people don't, like you said, have to have the added stress. This is just something that's provided to them. So with that in mind, what is the name of your book? Where can people find you? Where do they get this information? How can they work with you if they want to work with you, assuming you do that one-on-one work, or if they're maybe the chief medical officer of a hospital and they happen to be listening, where can they find your information and what you have to offer?
Yeah, thank you. So the book is called Cancer Journey, which you can find on Amazon or wherever you order your books. And then I've been gifting the cancer centers the program. So I work not really one-on-one. I do more leadership and workplace webinars to support the healthcare professionals, similar to that physician, right? Because just like a diet, if your doctor is, 600 pounds eating McDonald's twice a day and tells you to eat a salad and to make healthier choices, you may or may not follow that plan. But if your healthcare team is also practicing stress management techniques and supporting themselves in, the burnout is higher than ever, right? So if they're supporting themselves, you'll also see and feel that as a patient and be more likely to adhere to that plan. So people can find me at mindfulbasedhealing.com. You can purchase the book there, the course there, or connect to do some workplace wellness to support your healthcare professionals. I have started hearing from some corporations that are interested in providing both the book and the program for their employees, because 56% of those diagnosed are actually in the workforce. So employers are dealing with this as well, having employees that are suffering from cancer. So there's a lot of ways that we can help people and that they can gain benefit, and it doesn't have to feel like another thing to do. It really gives them the power and a little bit of control back.
And, it could also be, and I don't know if the research that's being done will show this. I certainly know there's a lot of research out there. I think there's been over 2,000 studies looking at mindfulness practices at the preventative nature of these practices. So yes, while 56%, I think that's what you said, of the workforce, of the people who this could benefit are in the workforce, meaning they're people who are working who get a cancer diagnosis. And then there's maybe all the people we don't want to have a cancer diagnosis. And these techniques can really be helpful in preventing that, because we know from the research that it reduces stress. It has a positive impact on our nervous system. It has a positive impact on our circulatory system. It also, of course, has a positive impact on our brains and our emotions, and which then also has a positive impact on our bodies because they're not separated. It's
Right.
the body mind, the mind body, right? And so I love that you're getting that excitement and that interest, because I mean, that's really where we're going to have the most impact with mindfulness techniques is getting in there and getting it everywhere. Everyone should be able to benefit from these practices, whether they have a cancer diagnosis or they're just a worker bee and
Right.
they want to have a happier, more fulfilled life. This is a way that they can do that. So really, thank you for your work. I do have like one little kind of fun question, I guess. I don't know, you might not think it's fun. That's unrelated to all the wonderful work that you're doing, but I was struck by your love for your daughter and, how that experience of kind of watching her and wanting to create a positive role model for her. So, going back to those days when you were growing up in, probably both positive and difficult times back in the Midwest, I don't know, what would you tell your 5-year-old self?
That is such a great question. What's come up over and over throughout my journey and exploration is you are enough. And I still have to remind myself to this day, because especially with access of social media and nothing's shut off and nothing's private, everything's out there for the world to see. Comparing doesn't just stop when you go home, right? You're constantly bombarded with all of these perfect images and perfect symbols of perfectionism everywhere. And I think it's easy to compare and feel like you aren't good enough, but you are just the way you are. And that's what makes you different, is your unique gifts and talents. And you don't have to be like everyone else, and you're still enough. So that's what I would tell myself, is just stay true to who you are, and that's enough.
Oh, I love that. I may have to print that out and put it on my wall as a reminder.
It's hard to remember sometimes, but
It is. It is. It's the simple but most important messages that, for ourselves and the people that we love in our lives, and even the people that we don't love in our lives, right? It's still applicable. It still applies. And so I love that. Well, is there anything else that you can think of that you want to make sure people know about you and your work, or did we cover most of it and they can find you on your website, which we'll also make sure to put in the show notes?
yeah, I think we covered it. I do want to share just one. I was watching Brene Brown, Atlas of the
Mm.
Heart, and a beautiful quote came that's coming up. It was by, I'll have to look up who it's by so we can quote it correctly. Something Angelo, I think, but it was something along the lines of, "We are not thinking beings who sometimes feel; we are feeling beings who sometimes think." Something along those lines. And I think that's applicable here, because we aren't, like you said, we aren't taught how to process. We aren't taught really how to communicate effectively. We aren't taught how to feel and listen to our bodies.
Mhm.
And we are feeling beings. So that should be the first thing that we're taught. I feel like we're having to learn that later in life. But if we remember we're enough and we're feeling beings, and that's okay, I think we'll be just fine.
I love that. And you'll never guess, but the meditation so on this podcast, we do interviews and then I do also guided meditations. The one that I just published last week was on that exact topic, on that exact quote.
Was
Ah,
it? Synergy.
total synergy. Yeah. And, for anyone who hasn't watched or read the book Atlas of the Heart, or watched the series, it's such a good reminder. It's so wonderful. Brene Brown's work is amazing, as is the work that she relies on in that book and on that series. And she's just fun to watch. And you're like, oh right, if Brene can do it, I can do it, right?
Right. Yes.
So thank you so much. And I will make sure to put everything in the show notes. And I'd love to maybe like check back with you, in 6 months' time or something to see what incredible work you've been doing. And hopefully, let's just manifest this here that insurance companies are going to cover it. The American Cancer Society, everybody's going to want to do this work. Corporations are going to want to do this work, and they're going to purchase this program and start working on this and supporting all of the people, because we are the body mind, we are the mind body, and we are the feeling body, and we deserve to feel good. So thank you again, Sarah. It's been great to have you.
Thank you, Melissa.
What could be more humbling than losing one's memories? Not knowing who you are, really, and what you've done, not recognizing faces. That could reasonably strike terror into most people, quite understandably. And yet, for Dane McCormick, our guest today, a Tasmanian-born and raised man living on mainland Australia, it never occurred to him. Instead, despite having lost most of his short-term and long-term memories to cancer and a subsequent brain infection, amongst other devastating losses, Dane methodically went in search for his memories, and he did so through writing. As he said, he's explored his life's purpose through his life, but he's only recently reflected on it after this amazing journey that he's been on. He was diagnosed with cancer in 2018 and spent 12 months in the hospital, where he was given 24 hours to live several times. He lost parts of his body, he lost his short-term memories, his sense of smell, his sense of taste, but as you'll see in this interview, never his sense of humor. Because, as he says, laughter really is the best medicine. And his story is really one of inspiration. And as he explained about his incredible journey, quote, "I'm a lot worse off because of it, but I'm also better because of it." Listen in to this captivating story about a regular man who lost his memories only to gain the gift of slowing down, being present, and accepting and loving life as it is. Hey everybody, it's Melissa, and I'm wondering if you all can relate. Have you ever caught yourself procrastinating, or maybe doubting your abilities, or maybe you have a black belt inner critic like I do or have had that wants to sabotage your every move with judgment and perfectionism expectations? It might keep you stuck, it might keep you anxious and away from your full potential. The Positive Intelligence Program, PQ, is a powerful 6-week journey designed to help you quiet those saboteurs, embrace positivity, and find flow in your life. Through daily practices and weekly focuses, we'll work together to build your mental fitness. The PQ app will guide you every step of the way and support you, and you'll be supported either by myself in a one-on-one or in a small group of like-minded individuals where you can share insights and progress. So reach out, contact me at info@thefullymindful.com to find out how we can work together one-on-one or in a small group today.